Here we are, the grand finale. Looking back over the past 8 episodes, Tom, what has been your favourite bit? What are the best bits, the highlights of season 1, the carbon removal show, in your eyes?
Okay, best bits from season 1. The puns.
Oh, the puns.
Those have been, they've been of mixed quality.
Excuse me?
I would say my favourite guest moments have been when the guest has said something that's just altered my perspective.
Oh, yeah.
And just, the silly moments that we've had together, Emily.
We have so many silly moments. It's been a pleasure.
It really has. Emily?
I really think some of the best moments for me have been just having fun with the storytelling of all this. We dive into the puns, but also the metaphors that we come out with, and probably taking all those analogies way too far, but having fun with it. My actual favourite bit, though, Tom, has been having fun with you in our recording sessions.
Oh, thanks, Emily.
Thanks for being here.
No, I would say the same.
You can't get too emotional. We have to dive into the rest of the episode.
Yes, before we get too emotional, I'd say the same.
And a lot of laughs. And then silence where Ben rolls his eyes.
I sense an eye roll there. I sense an eye roll. Hello, and welcome to the Carbon Removal Show. I'm Tom Praviti.
And I'm Emily Swaddle. And today we'll be asking, what's next for carbon removal? And how can people get involved? We should say welcome back to the Carbon Removal Show. This is episode 9 of season 1. Episode 9 of 9, actually.
Yeah, the final episode of season 1. It feels like these past few weeks have just flown by. And for those of you who've just discovered us, welcome. It's great to have you with us. Just a note, though, to any newbie listeners, before you dive in here, I would suggest going back and catching up on other episodes in this season where we lay the groundwork to lead up to this point of what should we do now?
Or don't. Maybe this episode will be a good way to get to know us, and it'll help you decide if you want more.
Yes, you could use this as a taster episode and a amuse-bouche. Anyway, whatever you do, this whole season, and especially this episode, have really been designed to make us think about how we can understand and get involved in the carbon removal field.
Right. I'd also like to acknowledge the different learning styles among our listeners. Some may need visual aids, perhaps, or even gamification to help them get a handle on these complex topics. If that is the case, I worry that podcasting might not be the best educational medium for you. But anyway, maybe some of you would be interested in a carbon removal game.
Okay, so now it's starting to feel like the final episode. I'm getting the vibes of it's the last week at school before the holidays, when we get to play games or watch movies, instead of actually doing any work.
Exactly. This is end of term podcasting. Unfortunately, we can't include a video, but we can play games. So today we're going to be playing The Road to 10 Gigatons, Carbon Removal Scale-Up Challenge. So you'll find yourself on a web page that is asking you to reach 10 gigatons of carbon removal with 6 options.
Opening up the page. Okay, so I'm on the homepage of The Road to 10 Gigatons. What have we got here? We've got, based on the claim by the IPCC that we'll be needing to remove 10 billion tons of CO2 from the atmosphere by 2050, I can create a portfolio, if you will, of carbon removal actions to get me to that scale. I'm seeing 6 different techniques, and I just slide the scale kind of left and right to increase each one.
And as you do that, you get scale-up consequences that arise. Some of them are good news, some of them are warnings, and some of them are outright deal breakers. And at the top of the page, it'll show you how close you are to your 10 gigatons, the cost of your solutions, the land use, the energy use, and the energy produced. So I'm starting off here from the 6 options. I'm starting off with forests, because everyone assumes that that's going to solve all our problems. You remember the responses to Elon Musk's tweet. Everyone was saying trees. It's simple, just trees. I really do not have to scale very far before I get a deal breaker coming up. And I have to resolve these deal breakers before I win.
What's the deal breaker?
So this one was quite predictable, probably. Deal breaker, too much land usage. Food prices skyrocket because I'm using up all the land. Okay, that's fair enough. Got to reduce that a bit.
So I'm now looking at some of the more engineered solutions. So I'm on the DAC solution and I'm sliding that up. There's good scalability. It's getting pretty high tons of removal, very high costs. Well, warning. It says warning. Breakthroughs and mass mobilization of low carbon energy sources that don't make up much land is needed to continue the scale up. Okay, so we're waiting for breakthroughs in low carbon energy to help scale that space.
So what I'm noticing here as I look at this, I'm being conservative with my sliding of the scales. And when I don't get deal breakers, I get good news. All the sort of side benefits of the options I'm choosing. Forests improving air quality, soil health is improving when I choose the soil option, restoration of coastal ecosystems with blue carbon, but I'm still only up to 3.4 billion tons, so I've still got quite a long way to go.
Yeah.
Oh, I did it! I got up to 10 gigatons with no major negative consequences, but now I need to make sure it's permanent. Oh my days. Oh wow. Well, I think we've still got a ways to go before we nail this game, Tom.
Yeah, you're definitely right. And we'll put the link in the show notes so you can have a go yourself. Let us know the perfect combination when you find it.
Yeah, tell us all your secrets. I want to nail this game.
You know, what's really clear from just playing around on this page for a few minutes is, one, how there is no single solution that's going to be the silver bullet, because two, every single solution has scale-up consequences. And so everything is kind of a part of this bigger system. We need that portfolio approach, and this visualization just really nicely demonstrates that.
Is this what they were all doing at COP26? Everyone looked so busy working away on their phones and laptops, but I bet they were just playing this game, trying to figure out how to reach carbon dioxide removal goals without breaking the planet any further.
Well, if they weren't, maybe they should have been.
I reckon all of our listeners will be aware of the COP26 that happened in Glasgow in November this year. For those of you who don't know, the COP26 is the Conference of Parties. It's an annual event that brings together governments and also increasingly businesses, academics, activists. They all come together to discuss and review climate action and how it's being managed domestically and internationally. Honestly, I get pretty overwhelmed by all of the news that comes out of an event like this, and I just can never engage in the way that I'd like to.
Oh, I totally get where you're coming from, Emily. There's so much information. However, I'm kind of the opposite in the sense that I get rather addicted to the news when something like this comes out.
Well, that works very nicely for me, Tom. Would you like to share some of your reflections relating to carbon removal?
I would like nothing more. I'm not going to sugarcoat this, however. So there's going to be some good things and some bad things.
Okay, I'm ready.
So firstly, this was the COP where carbon dioxide removal had the most presence out of any other COP that we've ever had. There was something like 40 plus events specifically on the topic, which signals that it is picking up traction, but it's still got a long way to go before it's part of the main conversation. The second point I want to make is that 80 to 90% of the world is now covered by some form of net zero commitment. Now, each net zero commitment inherently acknowledges the need for some form of carbon removal. As we know, we're not going to reach net zero anytime soon without that.
80 to 90%, that's some good numbers.
They are good numbers, and countries like India and China are also setting their net zero goals. But these are not necessarily on a 1.5 degree trajectory. The disheartening news at the moment is that it's looking like we're still going to overshoot that 1.5 degrees target. Now, carbon dioxide removal will have a role to play in addressing that overshoot, for example, but as we know, resources for carbon removal are just limited, and the current availability should rightly focus on hard to decarbonize industries.
Oh, I feel like you're already getting into some of the bad news here, Tom.
Right. Now, it's obviously impossible to summarise everything that campaigners were saying, but a big argument again was on net zero and about net zero as a philosophy. Going back to what we were talking about in episode 8 with that license to pollute, campaigners seem sceptical of countries and corporates in a way gaming this goal. by relying on removals as a replacement for the decarbonisation. The devil here is in the detail of these pledges, and understanding that nuance is key for us holding corporates and countries properly accountable. However, there is some cause for optimism. Industries that thought they'd had high residual emissions, for example, aviation, steel, cement, are now demonstrating decarbonisation pathways, which could mean less pressure and more time for carbon removal to get off the ground. Finally, there are loads of negotiations progressing which are indirectly relevant to carbon dioxide removal. The first big piece is carbon markets. Some agreements have been made on a rulebook for an international carbon market where the worst loopholes, such as double counting of credits, seem to be getting fixed. For anyone that's interested in learning a bit more about this, Google Article 6 online. Now, this does not include the voluntary market, which is what we've been focusing on this season. However, it should provide a really strong template for the voluntary market to follow in order to avoid the same pitfalls. The second part of negotiations that might be relevant to carbon removal are some of the nature solutions. Back to our old friend trees. More than 100 countries, including the likes of Brazil, China, Russia, have pledged to end deforestation by 2030. That's about 85% of the world's forests covered. Also, some progress on negotiations around carbon removal in agriculture has been made. Now, these are just political declarations, but they signal, that's the key thing, they signal acknowledgement and a will amongst countries to work together towards achieving carbon removal in the land sector, which is great for all of us nature-based enthusiasts out there. To summarise, the COP president, Alok Sharma, said about COP26, 1.5 degrees is still alive, but its pulse is weak. We're still on track to overshoot, and the further we are away from our 1.5 degrees target, the more necessary carbon dioxide removal is going to be. The less we decarbonise now, the more we're going to have to pay for it in carbon removal in the future. Ultimately, carbon removal is going to become an increasingly important part of international climate conversations over years and decades, and we can see the seeds of that from this COP26.
Well, thanks for those very thorough insights, Tom.
You're welcome, Emily.
You know, it's great to hear that there's increased engagement with carbon removal, these net zero pledges that hopefully, once we get down to the detail, are going to really stand up to the test of time. But I mean, this is COP26. We've had 26 of these. And we've known about anthropogenic climate change for decades, both in the scientific community and in the public sphere. So why is it that we're only getting started with carbon removal now? What took us so long? Or what's so special about this moment?
These are really good questions to be asking, and I suppose rightfully the focus has been on decarbonisation. We've mentioned a few times over the series that if we'd have acted faster and more efficiently on reducing our emissions decades ago, as people were calling for, the need for carbon removal in 2021 and beyond just wouldn't be so pressing.
Yeah. But now we find ourselves at a moment in history where both the need is clear and the ability to do something is greater than it's ever been before.
Exactly. And it feels like we're now at the beginning of a new wave of carbon removal awareness. We talked a lot last week about the public perception, and what we've learnt is that public opinion is really one of the most important drivers here. Even if it's corporations or governments who ultimately pull the trigger and make the decisions to invest in or push towards carbon removal, it's overwhelmingly as a result of this consumer pressure.
Yeah. And public pressure is often informed by media or scientific development, which, as we know, can be influenced by all sorts of things and is funded from a range of both private and public sources. It's a complex web, to be honest. And that's what we've been saying all along, really. We've talked about technical aspects of CDR, financial challenges, political engagement, etc. But these are not separate issues. This is a systems problem. It's not that one thing has to change. It's that systems have to change.
Oh, totally. And I think that that's part of what makes this such an overwhelming challenge in many people's minds. The idea that we could do a million small actions in different parts of that web, but ultimately still be working within the same old system. And it kind of feels like perhaps sticking band-aids over the cracks.
Yeah. Okay, but what if we were to look at this a little bit differently? Maybe we need to put our optimists' hats on just for a minute here.
Hold that thought. Just getting my hat on. Right, it's on.
Dig it out, dust it off, here we go.
Yeah, here we go.
Maybe all we need is for one of those small actions to start the ball rolling. You know how, like, Greta Thunberg started with her school strike and it was just her skipping school to strike against the government's approach to the climate crisis. And now it's become a global movement. It's essentially made people sit up and take this seriously. We need that for carbon removal. One small action to trigger a domino effect and start this revolution.
One thing that we're sure of is that systems thinking requires lots of people from different disciplines and backgrounds coming together. Over the course of this series, we've spoken with a whole host of brilliant guests with a diversity of backgrounds and experiences who have dedicated their careers to the climate and to the task of carbon removal. And during our conversations, we always wondered what started the ball rolling in our guests' climate stories.
Yes! And I think it's probably about time that we sent out a big thank you and a virtual hug, handshake or high five to everyone that we spoke to. Both those whose words we've been able to share with you on the show and many more who we didn't have space for in this series, but who helped inform our research, guided our mission, and whose words we hope to be able to share with you in the future. You've all made this series what it is and have given us literally hours, maybe days actually, of thoughtful conversations and so many moments for reflection.
I think at this point we're definitely banking in days now. Has to be more than 2 hours.
It's true.
And one of the most interesting parts of every conversation that we had was when we would ask people why they were dedicated to their work in this space. The answers we received were all completely different and all completely fascinating. And in the spirit of saving the best till last, we've waited until now to share just a handful of them with you.
How exciting! It's a little treat for the finale of season 1. We really wanted to end this series with a slice of inspiration for anyone who might be considering diving into this area themselves. Whether, that's a career pivot, a new venture, a course of study, whatever it might be. So you'll remember Aldyen Donnelly from episode 3. We spoke to Aldyen about her current work at Nori, but she's had a long and varied career in this space. And we asked her what sparked her interest in climate and the environment.
Well, I have to start by admitting I'm a pretty old lady, and I've been working in this space for 30 years, which probably also tells you I'm not very good at what I'm doing if we're just getting this started. But I've been a sailboat racer for most of my life. And in the late 80s, 90s, if you're on the water, anybody on the water as much as I was, saw things happening that didn't make any sense. Everything from very, very strange changes in patterns in fish migration to, in one season, every starfish on the whole coast disintegrating into dust. And we still don't know the full explanation, but when I started looking into possible explanations, climate change was definitely on the list. And I had already been working in the environment / new technology space, and decided that what I was seeing was so big that even if it was only 10% probable that it was climate change, it was probably where I should be putting some effort.
For Aldyen, it was seeing the likely effects of climate change firsthand and its impacts on marine wildlife that led to a lifetime's dedication to improving the planet. While her career has taken many different forms and perhaps seems far removed at this point from the initial moment of realization, it's easy to imagine how this powerful reminder of Earth's vulnerability could lead her down the path she's taken.
And this didn't come as a surprise, as a bit of a theme amongst many of the people we spoke to. Though she had always had a passion for the natural world, Harriet Rix, whom we spoke with in episode 2, saw the impacts of climate change up close when she was working in landmine clearance.
Well, I love trees for various reasons. I grew up with them. I then moved to the Middle East after university to work in landmine clearance, and I suddenly found myself, in a place where there were very few trees and missed them terribly. Because of the climate mitigation, we don't see the effects of climate change. We like to think we see the effects of climate change in the UK. We don't really. And I had a colleague in Fallujah who had a relation who had literally died of climate change because the temperature had got up to, I think, 54 degrees Celsius. And I worked on a minefield near Mosul where they said that there was just no point in clearing the minefield because the farmer whose land it was, who had lived there all his life, couldn't possibly farm anymore because the effects of climate change were now so dramatic. He was either in a flood or he was in a drought. There was no in between anymore. And I think that really made me think, well, yes, landmine clearance is important, but that's really scratching the surface. And environmental action is something that we nearly all need to focus on now as soon as possible and as hard as possible. Because if we don't change it now, then the effects will just spiral out of control. And the thought that a tree can alter that, something so beautiful, so different, so diverse, so interesting, it seems to me amazing.
Harriet speaks really powerfully about the problems she saw. Ultimately, her love of trees gave her a lens through which to see the climate change effects she was witnessing in the Middle East. And it gave her a sense of what the solution might look like. It would also eventually lead her to combine her passion with the work she knew needed to be done to help the climate.
It's that sense of what can I do that seems so important to our guests' journeys here. Diego Saez-Gil, who we also spoke with in episode 2 about his company Pachama, talked of two separate realizations. An initial moment when he realized how bad climate change might be, and then a later one when he discovered what he might do to help.
There are two moments that I remember. The first one is when I was finishing college back in Argentina, and I read for the first time a big report on climate change and the impacts that climate change could have in the future. And I remember reading for the first time about sea level rise and the fact that, so many cities could be underwater, and also about biodiversity loss. And I remember being depressed for 2 weeks. And my friends and my family didn't know what was going on with me, but I was just sad about what was going on in the world. I was, for the first time, seeing the big picture of climate change. But I didn't feel that I could do anything about it yet. So I went on my life. I went to do my master's in Barcelona. I got a job at a consulting firm. Then I came to the US to do an internship. I decided to start a startup, a technology startup, an app to help connect hostels with young travelers. And, climate change was always in the back of my head, but I didn't think that I could do something about it. But then 7 years passed in which I built 2 startups. And that gave me a lot of self-confidence that I actually could build things and I could make a change in the world in small or big scale, but I could do something about it. So at some point I said, well, I can maybe use all this experience that I learned building technology companies to put it at the service of climate change. And the second moment was after my second startup exited and it was acquired by another company. I took a sabbatical and went back to South America. And with my brothers, we went to visit the Amazon rainforest. And in the Amazon rainforest, I saw deforestation firsthand, which is one of the problems that is causing climate change, the fact that we're cutting down forests. And also, forests are a solution to climate change. There in the rainforest, I had this aha moment of here is an easy solution, quote unquote easy, because it's not that easy, it turns out, but it is something that is super effective at sequestering carbon. And maybe I can use my entrepreneurial skills to build a company that will help drive more funding to stop deforestation and drive reforestation. And I came back to California and I decided to start Pachama.
That initial sense of powerlessness, it's something I think many of us can relate to, and something that you spoke about a bit last episode, Emily. Desperately wanting to drive action but having no idea where or how to start. It was only years later, when Diego had picked up the technical skills and experience through his own business ventures, that he realised how he could combine this with his sense of urgency to act on our carbon problem.
Yeah, And I think Diego underlines how this is all about timing. We might all want to dive straight into this problem in the most immediate way possible. We'll start tomorrow, we'll hit the ground running, drop everything else. It's such an important and urgent problem that we need to get on it right now. But our careers are likely to take many twists and turns. And what we can offer will be different at different times throughout our lives. Apoorv Sinha, who spoke with us about his company Carbon Upcycling Technologies in episode 6, explained how his initial experience of founding a startup provided him with valuable lessons he was later able to apply when a new opportunity presented itself.
I had started a startup before this called TOHL or Toll, and that company's still running. Like, we're actually doing some work in South America still around rural water infrastructure and things like that. My initial motivation to get involved in that and co-found that with the business partner of mine was essentially to look at creating a positive impact socially in the area of humanitarian work. And the idea was conceived right in the aftermath of the Haiti earthquake in 2010. And so the intent very much was to look at natural disasters and how you can limit the loss of human life in the immediate aftermath of an event like that. I think one of the realizations I had 2 years into it was it is extremely difficult, however good the idea might seem from a technical standpoint, to push it along if the end user is not amenable to exploring it in a genuinely open way. I think one of the things I've begun to appreciate is, the importance of knowing your customer. And that was, our shortcoming with Toll. We didn't know that very well. We didn't know the mindset and the issues that kept a lot of these humanitarian people up at night as they're working in a disaster-prone region or a disaster-affected area. And that was probably the main kind of realization from the struggles we had at Toll at the start anyway, that led me to step back and say, as an engineer, like, what are things that I think I'm good at? And the second piece was being convinced at a certain level that this was actually a problem worth solving. And I had been in Calgary for about 3.5 years or so when one of the crown corporations in Alberta, Emission Reductions Alberta, put out this call for carbon utilization concepts. And it was a very unique competition. It was an open innovation kind of framework where any group from anywhere around the world could apply. A buddy of mine and I had just kind of gotten together. He just moved to Alberta for work. And he was rooming with me, and we're like, okay, let's brainstorm some ideas. And I was doing my master's at the time, so I had access to all these journals and essentially nerded out over a couple of weeks, found some chemical pathways for CO2 utilization that we found interesting, and then found something that was really novel, which was mineralizing carbon emissions into graphite or carbon-based materials. So it was essentially sequestering carbon into carbon. And there hadn't been a lot of work in that at all. And, that was the proposal that we wrote to the government body. We found out about 4 or 5 months later that we ended up getting $500,000 to actually move along with this. And I literally emailed my boss at work that evening saying, I need to have a chat. I'm going to quit later this week. And, started this company with 2 other guys. I would like to say that I've definitely made a whole bunch of new mistakes with carbon upcycling. But in terms of, finding something impactful that people actually want a solution for is not a mistake that we made this go around.
Apoorv really shows that it's not just a case of what can I do, but also what can I do now? And how can I apply what I've learned in another field of work to the task of carbon removal? To me, it's super motivating to hear how people like Apoorv have taken lessons from an earlier career moment and apply them to this space. And it really underlines how important it is to have people from all walks of life and professional backgrounds working in carbon removal. It's only by pooling these insights and experiences that we'll develop a robust industry, and it might surprise you how your own experiences can be applied to the challenge ahead, especially if you haven't got a climate background.
Yeah, and for some, it may be a case of finding that your technical knowledge and skill set is exactly what has been needed all along. We spoke with Dr. Katherine Romanak in episode 5 about geological sequestration. Today, Katherine works at the Bureau of Economic Geology, but this wasn't exactly the career path she'd always planned.
I was actually a volcanologist. I studied volcanoes, and I worked at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. at the Global Volcanism Program, and I was disseminating reports of active volcanic activity all around the world to scientists all around the world. And I basically decided that I wanted to, be the one on top of the volcano. I didn't want to be the one in the office taking the reports. And so I decided for that I should get my PhD. But just as I was getting my PhD, I was also getting married, thinking about having a family. And 3 of my colleagues were killed in 2 separate volcanic eruptions. And I realized at that time that it's probably not fair to my future children for them to have a mom off on an erupting volcano. And so I literally switched gears when I went to get my PhD at the University of Texas. And I was just looking for something in geochemistry because that's what I do, and found a professor that was studying the geochemistry of soils and how water and carbon dioxide were cycling through these soils. And so I took a PhD project looking at the gases that reside just in the shallow soils. And so I got my PhD 2 weeks before the birth of my second child. And I basically just decided, okay, I'm just going to be a mom now. Like I have my PhD, that's great, but I've got these beautiful children and I just want to be a mom. And so for 13 years, I was a mom, and then started to decide as they got older that I wanted to get back into geology. And I started looking around and found this thing called carbon capture and storage. And they were looking for people that had my skill set. So I immediately just landed my dream job at the Bureau of Economic Geology and found myself pretty much right in the middle of this incredible field, making a difference and trying to impact, climate change in a positive way. So it was really just an amazing journey that brought me here.
I loved hearing from Katherine about her unique journey into her current work. In the time that she was raising a family, her geochemical skills had become completely vital in a whole new industry that she could never have dreamed of working in back when she was studying for her PhD because it just didn't exist yet. It's so great that she was able to jump back in and provide much needed expertise and experience in a whole new area. I love this story.
I take back what I said earlier. My favourite bit of the season has got to be this. Hearing the most personal side of everyone's stories is super inspiring, and I love hearing these stories, and I'm now imagining what my story might look like in 5 to 10 years' time, what our story might look like. It's kind of like sitting around reminiscing with good friends and good wine,
Are you drinking wine while we podcast, Tom?
Are you not?
I agree. I love it. It's so great to hear the sort of human side of all this. I know that what we've been talking about has been super important, but that means that the people who we've been talking to are super important. And to get a sense of where they've come from and why they do what they do warms my heart.
It's been a real privilege.
All right, so we just got personal with all of our guests. We heard some of their stories. It was beautiful. Now it's our turn. Tom, I have a personal question for you.
A personal question for me. Okay, hit me.
Are you ready? You see, the thing is, we've chatted so much over the past few months, and I know all your opinions and thoughts and feelings and musings on all of this. At least I think I do.
I'm sure you do.
So now, to quote a king, a little less conversation, a little more action, please. Aside from sharing these conversations with me and our listeners, what have you actually done in your life over the course of the last year, thanks to your increasing understanding of carbon removal and its importance?
Okay, a little bit on the spot here. Just gotta have a think.
We can't be asking our listeners to take action if we're not taking action ourselves. So we've got to be open about this. What have we done? What do we intend to do?
I totally agree. So something which this podcast has really helped me do more of is have conversations with skeptics. And when I say skeptics, I could mean skeptics that perhaps are skeptical of climate change itself or anthropogenic climate change. But I also mean skeptics of carbon removal. It's been really, really insightful to learn about the need for this space and also why people may not see its value or be skeptical of it or see it as a distraction in some way. And so I've really enjoyed doing that, and it's actually encouraged me to speak more about these topics. I can't tell you how many different business ideas I've had off the back of this that I've written down on my little notebook and I'm trying to test at the moment and speak to people about. I've got ideas. Names aren't so good on that because I know that you're much better than me, Emily, so I'll need to quiz you on a few of those.
I was going to say we've got so many names that we could use, Tom. You don't need to worry about that part.
Good. I'm glad that the names are in your hands. I've also joined a bunch of different communities. There's a really fantastic Slack group called the Air Miners, which is about 1,000 people strong, and it's just full of individuals that are dedicated and passionate about carbon removal.
Another great name for a carbon removal community. Air miners. Love it.
Yes, very good name. Get some inspiration from that for sure. And I would say just more generally, I've just become a cheerleader of the space. I really advocate for it in the work that I do day to day and amongst friends and families. And half the time having conversations is just such a valuable thing to be doing. Emily, what about you? What have you done?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's great to hear all of what you've been doing, Tom. It's funny that we don't really talk about this between the two of us outside of the show even, but I agree with some of the things you've said. I've also been having those difficult conversations and with a bit more confidence, and be like, right, listen, this is what I know. This is what I can talk to you about. This is how I can communicate it as clearly as possible. Actually, a lot of those conversations have taken place with my sort of climate activist friends. Those people who are a bit skeptical about the idea of net zero because it might be an excuse for business as usual, and then sort of piling that skepticism on top of carbon removal. So I've been having a lot of those conversations, as you have, Tom. It's also given me the chance to scrutinize net zero claims or even climate positive claims when I'm shopping or reading about things. It's given me a much more solid framework through which to look at these pledges and the claims that companies are making. I've also made some financial contributions to good carbon offsets. I've chosen to do this through a company called Climeworks. You can look them up if you're interested. It's a really easy platform to use. As an individual, you can sign up to offset a small amount each month. We're talking kilograms rather than tons, so it's really manageable, and you can choose how much it is each month, so I really like this platform. Obviously, I've been playing the Road to 10 Gigatons game because it's a bit addictive, and I still haven't nailed it yet, so that's taken up some of my time.
How much of your time?
I don't think it's professional to say at this point. I too feel like an advocate with the conversations I'm having and the knowledge that I feel I can share. But also it's made me think what I can possibly do in the future. This is just the beginning. We can continue this conversation about carbon removal. And hopefully I personally will go on to do more things in this space as well.
On the mention of doing more things in this space, I do have plans to build my own backyard biochar kiln.
Are you beating me to the punch here, Tom?
Well, we've been talking about it and I've been researching it, and building your own biochar kiln doesn't seem super complex, at least the most kind of rudimentary versions. But I think it'll just give me a new perspective on that space, for example, that particular solution. So I will be inviting you all round for a biochar making barbecue weekend of some sorts at some point. How does that sound?
Love it. Yeah, campfire songs around the biochar kiln. That's a dream. And then maybe for season 2, I can interview you, Tom, and you can tell me about the process. Are you going to call it My Little Biochar Bakery? Because otherwise, I don't know what you're doing.
That's a firm favourite of mine. I think it'd be a crying shame not to pick that name.
I think so too.
This is what we've been inspired to do by what we've learnt over the course of this season. What have you been inspired to do? Maybe we can continue to inspire each other.
You may not be able to do all the things that we've mentioned, but you can definitely still be part of this movement. You already are part of this movement because you're listening to our show. As we finish off this season, we want to invite you, as always, to share the show, keep talking about it, keep talking about carbon removal, and keep learning. You can go to our website, restored.cc, and see our reading list for each episode. Those are some of the resources that we use to put the show together and might be really handy for you if you want to learn more.
A couple of very noteworthy mentions would be the Air Miners community that we talked about just before, the fantastic CDR primer, which has been a great basis point for us, the Carbon Removal Centre and Patricia Silva, who we spoke with earlier in the series. Carbon 180 is also a great resource.
And you can sign up to our newsletter. All past issues are available on Substack now. You'll find the link at our website. And every week I write a little something about my further reflections on that week's episode.
And if you have any suggestions for guests for season 2, or you have questions for us, or just want to continue the conversation, do let us know. Drop us a tweet or send us an email. Go to our website, restored.cc. We'd love to hear from you.
We would. He's not just saying that to be nice. So that's it. We wrap up season 1.
Yeah, that's it.
Take care of yourselves. Take care of the trees. We'll see you in season 2.
I'm done now.
I'd like it to end.
Complete. To make meaningful impact, businesses must focus on both rapidly decarbonising their operations and compensating unavoidable emissions. Fortunately, one of the Carbon Removal Show's sponsors has made it easy for businesses to neutralise their carbon footprint so they can focus on cutting unnecessary emissions altogether.
That's right. Patch is the marketplace for carbon removal. They help companies estimate carbon emissions for certain activities and then neutralise them by purchasing high-quality carbon removal from a portfolio of projects. Patch's project network includes both nature-based projects like forestry, soil and kelp, and cutting-edge technologies like biochar and mineralisation.
Head to patch.io today to find out more. Thank you so much to our team who make this series possible.
Our researcher and fact-checker Henry Irvine.
Our composer, Sam Carter.
Our graphic designer, Reke Campbell.
Our editor, Mercy Barno.
Our producer, Ben Weaver-Hinks.
Our project manager, Patrick Carter.
And our executive producer, Sam Floy. Thank you for listening to the Carbon Removal Show. I'm Emily Swaddle.
And I am Tom Praviti.
This is it for season 1. We've come to the end. Follow us on Twitter, sign up to our newsletter to find out what comes next for us. We'll see you soon.
See ya.
Co-fruition.